leave a comment with your city name, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
The crystalline spires of Centauri Prime gleamed like frozen starlight against the pearl-white sky, their surfaces alive with holographic displays showcasing the most advanced military vessels the galaxy had ever seen. The annual Galactic Defense Expo was in full swing, drawing representatives from every major civilization to witness the unveiling of technologies that push the very boundaries of physics. Admiral Rachel Torres stood at the observation deck of the human delegation quarters, watching the parade of impossible warships through the transparent aluminum viewport. At 52, she had spent her entire career building Earth's space navy from salvaged colony ships and retrofitted cargo haulers into something resembling a proper fleet. Her weathered face, marked by years of void walking and the stress of defending humanity's scattered colonies, remained impassive as she watched vessels that made her proudest achievements look like antiques. "Magnificent, aren't they?" came a melodious voice behind her. Torres turned to see Ambassador Kethfer approaching, his tall, ethereal form shimmering with the natural bioluminescence of his species. The Zephyrian diplomat's expression held all the warmth of liquid nitrogen. "Impressive," Torres replied diplomatically, though her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Through the viewport, a Zephyrian crystal ship performed an impossible maneuver, its lattice structure shifting from solid matter to pure energy and back again as it phased through a series of obstacle courses. The vessel existed in a constant state of quantum flux, able to become intangible at will, making it theoretically immune to any conventional weapon. "The stellar harmony," Kethfer said with obvious pride. "Our latest dreadnought. Quantum crystalline. Matrix hull, consciousness-linked navigation, weapons that fire coherent possibility itself. It can exist in 17 different dimensional states simultaneously." Before Torres could respond, a sound like thunder made of music rolled across the exhibition ground. A massive biomechanical vessel descended from the clouds, its hull writhing with what looked like living metal. Organic conduits pulsed with bioluminescent fluids, and weapon pods that resembled flowering buds tracked across the sky with predatory grace. "War Master Thrix's new flagship," Kethfer continued, his tone shifting to grudging respect. "The Vorthans have outdone themselves with the Living Storm, bioadaptive armor that evolves in real time, weapons that literally grow new configurations mid-battle, and a self-repairing hull that can regenerate from near-total destruction." As if summoned by his name, War Master Thrix materialized on the observation deck, literally. The Vorthan's form was a disturbing fusion of flesh and technology, cybernetic implants seamlessly integrated with organic tissue. His multiple eyes fixed on Torres with what might have been amusement. "Admiral Torres," he rumbled, his voice emanating from speakers grafted into his throat. "I trust you're enjoying the display of real military technology?" Torres's expression didn't change. "It's certainly educational." The final spectacle arrived without fanfare, yet somehow commanded attention more than the previous two combined. The Etherian vessel didn't so much appear as simply become present, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It looked like a geometric impossibility, angles that folded in on themselves, surfaces that were both convex and concave depending on viewing angle. Observer Sindal's presence was announced not by movement or sound, but by a subtle shift in local reality. The Etherian existed as pure consciousness housed in a crystalline construct, their body a semi-translucent geometric form that hurt to look at directly. The dimensional superiority of Etherian engineering, Sindal's voice resonated directly, in their minds rather than through audible sound. The quantum paradox operates across 17 known dimensions and 14 theoretical ones. It can attack enemies that exist in entirely different realities. Torres watched as the impossible ship demonstrated its capabilities, firing weapons that struck targets in the past to prevent them from ever launching, while simultaneously defending against attacks that hadn't been made yet. The display of temporal manipulation was so advanced it bordered on magic. "Fascinating," Torres said, her tone carefully neutral. "And the human fleet?" The silence that followed was deafening. Kethver's bioluminescence dimmed to an embarrassed flicker. Thrix's mechanical components whirred with what sounded suspiciously like suppressed laughter. Even Sindal's crystalline form seemed to pulse with amusement. "Ah, yes," Kethver finally said, his melodious voice carefully diplomatic. The ... human contribution. "I believe your ships are scheduled for demonstration this afternoon." Through the viewport, Torres could see the human fleet in the distance, a collection of gray steel vessels that looked like museum pieces compared to the technological marvels around them. The U's Indomitable, her flagship, was a study in utilitarian brutality. Angular steel hull plates welded together with visible seams, external sensor arrays that looked like they'd been bolted on as afterthoughts, and weapon systems that any civilized species had abandoned millennia ago. "Steel and chemical rockets," Thrix observed, his tone suggesting he was commenting on cave paintings. "Kinetic projectiles and primitive fusion reactors. Tell me, Admiral, is this some sort of historical exhibition? A demonstration of how warfare was conducted in the early atomic age?" "These are our current frontline vessels," Torres replied evenly. The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sound of the crystal ship, demonstrating its ability to exist in negative space. The afternoon demonstration was a masterclass in humiliation disguised as diplomacy. Torres stood on the main stage of the Centauri Prime Amphitheater, surrounded by holographic displays showing her fleet's capabilities. To an audience of the galaxy's most advanced military minds, the statistics were brutally unflattering when compared to the morning showcases. Where the Zephyrian vessels could phase through matter, human ships relied on crude armor plating. Where Vorthan bioships self-repaired in real time, human vessels required manual maintenance by crews in environmental suits. Where Etherian craft existed across multiple dimensions, human ships were locked into boring single-dimensional reality. The human approach to naval architecture, Torres began, her voice carrying clearly across the amphitheater, prioritizes reliability, maintainability, and robust performance under adverse conditions. A ripple of what might charitably be called polite interest moved through the audience. It sounded more like suppressed amusement. "The U.S. Indomitable represents the pinnacle of human engineering," Torres continued, highlighting her flagship. On the main display, steel composite hull rated for impact resistance up to 12,000 joules per square meter. Redundant life support systems with manual backup controls. Kinetic projectile weapons with effective range of 40,000 kilometers. War Master Thrix leaned forward in his seat, his cybernetic eyes focusing on the technical specifications. "Admiral, those numbers ... they're quite modest. My personal shuttle has better defensive capabilities." "A human approach," Torres said without missing a beat, "emphasizes proven technology over experimental systems. Every component has been tested under combat conditions." "Combat conditions?" Ambassador Kethver's bioluminescence flickered with curiosity. "Forgive me, Admiral, but when has humanity faced true combat? Pirate raids on cargo convoys hardly qualify as warfare." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Torres's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only sign that the casual dismissal had struck home. "We've had our share of conflicts," she replied diplomatically. The demonstration continued with painful thoroughness. Human fusion reactors that produced a mere fraction of the energy output of Zephyrian crystal matrices. communication systems that relied on primitive electromagnetic radiation instead of quantum entanglement, navigation computers that required actual calculation instead of consciousness linking with it. But universe itself. By the time Torres finished her presentation, the mood in the amphitheater had shifted from polite interest to something approaching pity. These weren't warships being displayed. They were relics, museum pieces that belonged in a historical exhibit rather than active service. Galactic News Network's coverage that evening was particularly brutal. The lead story featured a side-by-side comparison of the Stellar Harmony's quantum phase capabilities with the Indomitables' primitive chemical maneuvering thrusters. The human flagship looked like it had been assembled by enthusiastic amateurs in a scrapyard. Earth's military contribution to the Galactic Defense Pact continues to raise questions. The Altarian news anchor reported, her forearms gesturing at holographic displays. While human determination is admirable, one must question whether their technological limitations make them more liability than asset in any serious conflict. The commentary section was worse. Expert after expert lined up to explain, with scientific precision, exactly why human military technology was hilariously. A Vorthan strategic analyst demonstrated how bioadaptive armor could repair kinetic damage faster than human weapons could inflict it. A Zephyrian physicist showed mathematical proof that phase-capable vessels were literally immune to any attack humanity could mount. It's not their fault, observed Dr. Veltar, a prominent military technology researcher. Humanity is still in the early stages of technological development. Give them another few thousand years and they might develop something genuinely useful. Until then, perhaps they should focus on what they do best: cargo transport and mining operations. Torres watched the coverage from her quarters aboard the Indomitable, her expression carved from stone. Around her, the ship hummed with the familiar sounds of human engineering, the subtle vibration of the fusion reactor, the whisper of air recyclers, the distant clank of maintenance crews performing routine repairs. Captain Sarah Chun, her chief of staff, entered with a datapad and an expression that suggested she'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. Admiral, the afternoon council session has been ... eventful. Torres accepted the pad and scrolled through the diplomatic summary. The Galactic Defense Council had spent 4 hours debating humanity's role in the Alliance, and the conclusions weren't flattering. Cargo escort duty, Torres read aloud. Humanitarian supply runs to remote colonies. Logistical support for real military operations. She looked up at Chun. They're turning us into a taxi service. There's more, Chun sighed reluctantly. Ambassador Kethfer has formally requested that human vessels be restricted from frontline duty. For our own protection, he says. The consensus is that our ships would be more hindrance than help in any actual conflict. Torres set down the pad and walked to the viewport. Outside, the Zephyrian crystal ships were practicing formation maneuvers, their hulls shifting through phases of matter like dancers made of light. In the distance, a Vorthan biocruiser was literally growing new weapon pods as she watched. "Ma'am?" Chun's voice was carefully neutral. "What are your orders?" Torres was quiet for a long moment, watching the impossible ballet of advanced alien technology. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of years spent fighting. "For respect that never came. We follow orders, Captain. We escort cargo ships and run supplies to mining colonies. And we maintain our vessels to the highest possible standard. Because we might get another chance to prove ourselves?" Torres's reflection in the viewport showed a smile with no humor in it. "Because when the time comes, and it will come, we'll be ready. Hey there, space warriors. I can feel the frustration building already, can't you? But trust me, this is just the beginning. If you're feeling that fire in your belly right now, that sense of injustice, smash that like button. And let me know in the comments, what's the most outdated thing you use that actually works better than the new stuff? This story is about to get intense. The first signs of trouble came from the deep survey stations at the galactic rim, where automated probes had been pushing the boundaries of known space for centuries. Dr. Elena Vasquez, humanity's chief xenorchaeologist, was reviewing routine data feeds in her cluttered office aboard Frontier Station Alpha when the pattern caught her attention. "That's odd," she murmured, pulling up the anomalous readings on her primary screen. The data showed massive electromagnetic disturbances coming from empty space regions, where stellar cartography insisted nothing existed. 3 survey probes had gone silent in the past week, their final transmissions showing massive energy spikes before complete communications failure. In any other context, she might have attributed it to equipment failure or stellar phenomena. But the pattern was too regular, too purposeful. She forwarded the data to Admiral Torres aboard the Indomitable, which was currently shepherding a convoy of mining equipment to the Kepler colonies, another taxi service mission that had become their standard assignment. Torres reviewed the data in her ready room, Captain Chun looking over her shoulder at the disturbing readings. "Could be natural phenomena," Chun suggested, though her tone indicated she didn't believe it. "Could be," Torres agreed. "But look at the timing. Each probe goes silent exactly 17 minutes after detecting the initial energy spike. That's not random." Before either could speculate further, an urgent communication came through from Galactic Command. Admiral Vorthak, the 4-armed Centaurian who commanded the Defense Council's forces, appeared on the holographic display with his usual expression of barely contained arrogance. "Admiral Torres," he rumbled, his primary arms gesturing dismissively, while his secondary ones manipulated data displays. "I trust your ... cargo run is proceeding smoothly?" "No issues, Admiral," Torres replied diplomatically. "Excellent. I'm transmitting new orders. Some of our deep space assets have encountered minor technical difficulties in Sector 7. Nothing serious. But we need reliable vessels to investigate. Real warships are needed elsewhere." Torres accepted the orders with professional calm, but she noticed something interesting in the data packet. The minor technical difficulties were occurring in the exact region where Dr. Vasquez had detected her anomalies. "Understood, Admiral. The human fleet will investigate immediately." "Good. Try not to get lost out there, Torres. We'd hate to have to send actual warships to rescue you." The transmission ended, leaving Torres staring at the star charts with growing unease. Whatever was happening in Sector 7, the Galactic Command was either unaware of its significance or choosing to downplay it dramatically. The journey to Sector 7 took the human convoy 3 days at maximum burn. They're primitive. Fusion drives pushing them toward the galactic rim. As they approached the coordinates, long-range sensors began picking up debris fields where the missing probe should have been. But it wasn't just probe wreckage. "Admiral," Lieutenant Riguez called from the sensor station, his voice tight. With disbelief, "I'm reading Hulk signatures. Big ones. These look like military vessels." Torres moved to the tactical display, studying the enhanced sensor readings. The debris was indeed from warships, advanced ones, judging by the exotic material compositions their scanners were detecting. "Can you identify the origin?" she asked. Rodriguez worked his console for several minutes before shaking his head. "The alloy compositions don't match anything in our database. Whatever built these ships, they're not from any known galactic civilization. Captain Chun joined them at the tactical station." "How old is this debris?" "That's the strange part," Rodriguez replied. "Based on drift patterns and degradation, some of this wreckage is thousands of years old, but some of it ... He paused, rechecking his readings. "Some of it is less than a week old." Torres felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ships. Environmental systems. Show me the fresh debris. The display shifted to focus on the newer wreckage. The hull materials were definitely alien, but the technological signatures were disturbingly familiar. Too familiar. "Chun," Torres said quietly, "get me a secure channel to Dr. Vasquez, and start running passive scans on everything we can reach. I want to know what we're dealing with before it knows we're here." The investigation that followed painted a picture that made Torres's blood run cold. The ancient debris belonged to ships that had clearly been incredibly advanced, technology that would make current galactic civilizations look primitive. But they'd been destroyed by something that left very specific signature patterns in the wreckage. The fresh debris was worse. Analysis of the hull fragments revealed they contained traces of Zephyrian quantum crystalline matrices, Vorthan bioadaptive materials, and Etherian dimensional fold technology. "Admiral," Dr. Vasquez's voice came through the secure channel. "I've been running historical analysis on the older wreckage. These ships, they're from the first expansion era over 3,000 years ago. The civilization that built them was called the Builders. They were supposedly the most technologically advanced species the galaxy had ever seen. What happened to them? Official records say they transcended physical existence. Evolved beyond the need for material form." Vasquez paused. "But the evidence suggests something different. These debris patterns indicate they were wiped out, completely, by something that specifically targeted their most advanced technologies." Torres stared at the tactical display, pieces of a terrifying puzzle falling into place. "Doctor, I need you to run a comparative analysis. Compare the destruction patterns from the ancient wreckage with the fresh debris we're finding." The results came back within an hour, and they confirmed Torres's worst fears. The destruction patterns were identical. Something that had destroyed the galaxy's most advanced civilization 3 millennia ago was active again, and it was systematically hunting down and destroying the most sophisticated military vessels of the current era. Before Torres could fully process the implications, proximity alarms began screaming throughout the ship. "Contact!" Rodriguez shouted, massive energy signature emerging from nowhere. "It's just appeared." The main screen shifted to visual, and Torres found herself staring at something that challenged her understanding of reality. The object was clearly artificial, but it seemed to exist in a constant state of flux, surfaces that folded into themselves, geometries that hurt to contemplate, and an overall sense of wrongness that made her eyes water. "It's scanning us," Rodriguez reported, his voice climbing toward panic. "Some kind of active probe. It's analyzing our hull composition, our power signatures, our ... The scan stopped abruptly. For a moment, the alien construct simply hung in space, as if contemplating the results of its analysis. Then it vanished. "Where did it go?" Torres demanded. "Unknown, Admiral. It just ... stopped existing. No energy trail, no dimensional fold signature. It's like it was never there." Torres stared at the empty space where the entity had been, her mind racing through the implications. Whatever that thing was, it had scanned their ships and then simply left. Why? The answer came to her with the force of revelation. The ancient builders had been destroyed because their technology was too advanced. The current galactic powers were being hunted for the same reason. But the human fleet... "Rodriguez," she said quietly, "when that thing scanned us, what would it have detected?" The lieutenant checked his readings. Steel hull composition, primitive fusion reactor, chemical propulsion, kinetic projectile weapons. He paused, understanding dawning in his eyes. Nothing that would register as advanced technology. Exactly. We're so primitive that we're beneath its notice. The implications were staggering. Humanity's greatest weakness might be their only hope of survival. The emergency session of the Galactic Defense Council convened within 12 hours of Torres's report, though not because of anything she had said. While the human fleet was investigating debris fields in Sector 7, the galaxy's most advanced military forces had encountered the same entities that Torres had observed. The results had been catastrophic. Ambassador Kethfer materialized on the Council Chamber's central platform, his normally radiant bioluminescence dim with what Torres was beginning to recognize as shock. His usually melodious voice carried undertones of disbelief and growing horror. "The stellar harmony is gone," he announced to the assembled delegates, along with her entire escort squadron. 7 quantum phase-capable vessels representing the pinnacle of Zephyrian naval technology. War Master Thrix's cybernetic form clicked and whirred with agitation as he stepped forward. The Vorthan Second Fleet engaged the entities 3 hours ago. The bioship's adaptive systems were not just defeated, they were turned against us. The vessels began attacking their own crews. Observer. Sindal's crystalline form pulsed with rapid flashes of light, the Etherian equivalent of panic. Dimensional fold technology has been compromised. The entities exist partially outside normal space-time. Our most advanced weapons cannot target what does not fully exist in our reality. Admiral Vorthak, who had spent the past month dismissing human capabilities, looked distinctly less arrogant as he addressed the assembly. "We're facing an enemy that appears specifically designed to counter advanced military technology. Their vessels, if they can be called vessels, adapt in real time to any sophisticated system they encounter." Torres listened from the human delegation section, which was positioned near the back of the chamber, a not-so-subtle reminder of humanity's perceived importance. Captain Chun sat beside her, both of them taking careful notes as the galaxy's most powerful civilizations described their defeats. "What do we know about these entities?" asked Chancellor Mordain, the elderly Rigelian who served as the Council's civilian oversight. Vorthak activated a holographic display showing the reconnaissance data. "They call themselves the Harvesters. Based on archaeological evidence, they're an ancient artificial intelligence created by a species called the Builders approximately 3,000 years ago." "Created for what purpose?" Mordain pressed. "Unknown. But their behavior pattern is clear. They systematically seek out and destroy advanced technological civilizations. The more sophisticated the technology, the higher the priority target." A murmur of unease rippled through the assembly. Every major power represented in the chamber had built their military might on increasingly advanced technology. "What are our options?" asked War Master Thrix. "We're exploring several alternatives," Vorthak replied. "Increased shielding, quantum, encryption of command systems, dimensional phase shifting to avoid detection." Torres found herself standing before she'd consciously decided to speak. "Admiral Vorthak." The chamber fell silent. Vorthak's 4 eyes focused on her with obvious reluctance. "Yes, Admiral Torres? Has anyone considered that we might be approaching this backwards? I'm not sure I follow." Torres walked to the center of the chamber, her simple human uniform, a stark contrast to the exotic materials and technological augmentations worn by every other military representative present. Every solution being discussed involves more advanced technology: quantum encryption, dimensional phase shifting, enhanced shielding. But what if the Harvesters are specifically designed to counter technological advancement? Kethver's bioluminescence flickered with what might have been impatience. "Admiral, surely you're not suggesting we abandon our technological advantages?" "I'm suggesting we consider why they haven't attacked humanity." That got their attention. Torres activated her own holographic display, showing the encounter data from Sector 7. A Harvester entity scanned our fleet for 43 seconds. Complete analysis of our hull composition, weapon systems, power generation, and technological capabilities. Then it left. Perhaps it was called away to more important targets, Thrix suggested. Or perhaps it determined we weren't worth harvesting. The silence that followed was profound. Torres could see the wheels turning in alien minds as they processed. The implications. You're proposing that humanity's technological ... limitations ... make you immune to these entities? Sindal's mental voice carried what might have been hope. I'm proposing that sometimes the most advanced solution isn't the best solution. Vorthak's expression shifted through several configurations of disbelief. Admiral, you can't seriously be suggesting that primitive technology is superior to I'm suggesting that the right tool for the job isn't always the most sophisticated tool. Torres activated another display, this one showing comparative analyses of harvester attack patterns. Every vessel they've destroyed shared common characteristics. Quantum-linked systems, bioadaptive materials, dimensional fold technology, consciousness interfaced controls. The more advanced the system, the faster it was compromised. Because the harvesters are designed to counter advanced technology, Mordain said slowly. Exactly. But what if we field technology that's so simple, so robust, so deliberately primitive, that their countermeasures can't interface with it? War Master Thrix's cybernetic components whirred as he processed the concept. You're talking about deliberate technological regression. I'm talking about appropriate technology for the threat we face. The debate that followed was intense and often heated. Representatives from every major civilization struggled with the concept that their greatest technological achievements might be liabilities rather than assets. This is absurd, Kethfor declared, his bioluminescence flaring with indignation. We didn't spend millennia developing quantum phase technology, just to abandon it for chemical rockets and steel plating. Your quantum phase technology has been compromised, Torres replied calmly. The stellar harmony was destroyed because its most advanced systems were turned against it. Then we'll develop countermeasures. Enhanced quantum encryption, isolated control systems, which the harvesters will counter with enhanced countermeasures. You're trying to out-evolve an enemy that's had 3,000 years to perfect its adaptation algorithms. Observer Sindal's crystalline form pulsed with rapid thought patterns. Admiral Torres raises a valid point. Our approach has been to combat the harvesters with increasingly sophisticated technology. This has resulted in increasingly sophisticated defeats. Are you seriously considering this? Thrix demanded. I'm considering survival, Sindal replied. Human vessels were scanned and dismissed as non-threats. No other galactic military force can make that claim. The debate continued for hours, but Torres could see the tide slowly turning. Fear was a powerful motivator, and the galaxy's most. Advanced civilizations were genuinely afraid for the first time in centuries. Finally, Chancellor Mordain called for order. The situation is clear. Our current approach is failing catastrophically. Admiral Torres, what exactly are you proposing? Torres had been preparing for this moment since her encounter in Saldus, Sector 7, a joint task force using deliberately simplified technology, steel hulls instead of exotic materials, chemical propulsion instead of dimensional drives, kinetic weapons instead of energy manipulation, manual controls instead of consciousness interfaces. You want us to fight like primitives, Vorthak said flatly. I want us to fight like survivors. The vote was closer than Torres had expected. In the end, desperation won over pride by a margin of 3 votes. The transformation of the galaxy's most advanced military forces into something resembling Torres's primitive fleet was a process that defied every principle of technological progress. Zephyrian crystal ships had their quantum matrices replaced with steel plating. Vorthan biovessels were fitted with mechanical systems that couldn't be corrupted or turned against their crews. Etherian dimensional craft were rebuilt as single-dimension vessels with purely analog controls. The work took place in secret at a hidden shipyard in the Kepler system, where human engineers found themselves in the unprecedented position of teaching advanced alien civilizations how to build inferior technology. Chief Engineer Patricia Santa stood in the main assembly bay, watching a team of Zephyrian technicians struggle to install what they clearly considered barbarically primitive reactor controls in their reconstructed vessel. No, she called out, approaching the work site. You're making it too complicated. This isn't a consciousness interface. It's a mechanical switch. You flip it, the reactor activates. You flip it back, it shuts down. The lead Zephyrian technician, a being whose name Santos couldn't pronounce and who glowed with frustrated confusion, gestured at the simple control panel. But how does it know our intentions? How does it anticipate our needs? It doesn't. That's the point. You have to tell it what to do manually. But that's so inefficient. Inefficient, maybe, but also unhackable, uncorruptible, and completely immune to any form of digital warfare. Across the bay, War Master Thrix was having similar difficulties with human weapons specialists. The Vorthan commander had requested the installation of kinetic projectile weapons to replace his bioship's adaptive energy systems, but he was struggling with the concept. "Let me understand this correctly," he said to Gunnery Sergeant Maria Vasquez. "This weapon fires metal projectiles using chemical propulsion?" "Yes, sir." "Magnetically accelerated tungsten slugs. They travel at approximately 12 kilometers per second and punch holes in whatever they hit. And they cannot be adapted or countered? Well, you can try to dodge them or put armor in the way, but they're just chunks of metal moving really fast. There's no technology to hack or countermeasures to deploy. They hit you or they don't." Thrix's multiple eyes focused on the weapon system with something approaching reverence. "Elegant in its simplicity. We like to think so." The real challenge came with the Etherian vessels. Observer Sindal's consciousness was having significant difficulty adapting to purely physical control systems. After millennia of direct mental interface with their ship's Dr. Webb, who had been brought in as a consultant on primitive control systems, found himself in the surreal position of teaching a crystalline being of pure consciousness how to use manual switches. "Think of it as meditation," he suggested to Sindal's geometric form. "Instead of melding with the ship's consciousness, you're engaging with it through deliberate, mindful actions." But the inefficiency, Sindal's mental voice carried overtones of distress. The delay between thought and action. The possibility of error. "The possibility of error is a feature, not a bug," Webb replied. "When the harvesters try to predict your actions, they'll be analyzing a being who has to manually input every command. Your inefficiency becomes unpredictability." As the modifications continued, Torres found herself walking through the shipyard with a mixture of pride and apprehension. The vessels taking shape around her represented a rejection of everything the galaxy considered progressive and advanced. They were crude, simple, deliberately primitive. They were also the galaxy's best hope for survival. Captain Chun joined her on the observation deck overlooking the main assembly area. "Admiral, I have to ask, are you sure about this?" Torres watched a Zephyrian engineer struggling to understand why human ships didn't automatically adjust their environmental systems based on crew biometrics. "Sarah, in my 30 years of service, I've seen advanced technology fail in ways that would have been impossible with simpler systems. Quantum computers that couldn't function because they were too sensitive to interference. Bioadaptive armor that tried to protect crew members to death. consciousness-linked navigation that got confused during combat stress. And you think our approach is better? I think our approach is appropriate. When you're dealing with an enemy that specializes in turning sophistication against you, sophistication becomes a liability. 3 weeks into the modification process, the first Harvester probe returned to Sector 7. This time, they were ready for it. The Joint Task Force consisted of 12 vessels, 4 human ships that required no modification, 3 rebuilt Zephyrian cruisers, 3 converted Vorthan bioships, and 2 reconstructed Etherian craft. Each vessel was a study in deliberate simplicity, armed with kinetic weapons, protected by steel armor, and controlled by manual systems that no artificial intelligence could hack. Torres commanded the operation from the Indomitable, which had been upgraded only in the sense that they'd bolted additional armor plating to her hull and installed extra ammunition storage for the kinetic projectile weapons. Contact bearing 037 Mark 15, Rodriguez reported from the sensor station. Same configuration as before, but it's not alone this time. The tactical display showed 3 Harvester entities materializing from apparently empty space. The constructs were even more disturbing in formation. Their impossible geometries seemed to complement each other, creating patterns that hurt to contemplate. All ships, this is Admiral Torres. Remember, manual controls only, no automated systems, and keep your firing solution simple. These things are used to fighting computers. We're going to fight like humans. The Harvesters began their scanning protocol, the same pattern Torres had observed during her first encounter. But this time, instead of 12 ships running advanced systems, they found vessels that barely registered as technological at all. They're confused, observed Sindel from the rebuilt Etherian vessel Simple Truth. Their analysis algorithms are indicating the presence of intelligence without corresponding technological sophistication. Good, Torres replied. Let them stay. Confused. All ships close to engagement range. When I give the word, we hit them with everything we have. The approach took 15 minutes, an eternity in space combat, but the Harvesters seemed unable to determine whether the approaching vessels represented a threat. Their countermeasures were designed for quantum weapons, bioadaptive systems, and dimensional manipulation. They had no protocols for dealing with ships that were essentially flying chunks of metal with fusion reactors. Admiral, called War Master, Thrix from his converted bioship were within effective range of kinetic weapons. All ships, open fire. What followed was the most primitive space battle the galaxy had seen in millennia. No energy beams or quantum torpedoes, no dimensional rifts or bioadaptive missiles. Just tungsten slugs accelerated to incredible velocities by magnetic coils, punching through Harvester constructs like bullets through paper. The Harvester's response was immediate and sophisticated. They deployed countermeasures designed to deflect energy weapons, disrupt quantum coherence, and corrupt bioadaptive systems, none of which had any effect on magnetically accelerated chunks of metal. Direct hit on the lead Harvester, Rodriguez reported with something approaching awe. It's just falling apart. Their hull material can't handle simple kinetic impact. The battle was over in minutes. 3 Harvester entities, each capable of destroying the galaxy's most advanced warships, were reduced to drifting debris by weapons that any pre-space civilization could have built. In the silence that followed, Torres allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. They had just proven that sometimes the best way to fight the future was with the past. All ships begin salvage operations. I want to know everything we can learn about these constructs. And someone get me a channel to Galactic Command. I think they're going to want to hear about this. The aftermath of the Battle of Sector 7, as historians would later call it, sent shockwaves through galactic civilization that would reshape military thinking for generations to come. Admiral Vorthak's reaction to Torres's battle report was a masterclass in wounded pride struggling against undeniable reality. The four-armed Centaurian had spent his entire career climbing the ranks through mastery of increasingly sophisticated military technologies. Now he was being forced to confront the possibility that his life's work might be fundamentally flawed. "You're telling me," he said slowly, his primary arms gesturing at the tactical displays while his secondary ones gripped the edge of his command console, "that three Harvester entities, constructs that destroyed our most advanced battle fleets, were defeated by kinetic projectiles? Magnetically accelerated tungsten slugs, to be precise," Torres replied from the holographic transmission, "fired from chemically propelled vessels with steel hulls and manual control systems. This is impossible." "The debris field suggests otherwise, Admiral." The evidence was overwhelming. Detailed scans of the destroyed Harvester constructs revealed technology so advanced it bordered on magic, self-repairing nanoscale architecture, quantum coherent control systems, adaptive camouflage that could simulate non-existence. All of it utterly useless against simple kinetic weapons that operated on principles discovered in humanity's medieval period. War Master Thrix, participating in the briefing from his own vessel, leaned into the transmission pickup. "Admiral Torres, I need to understand the tactical implications. Are you suggesting that all advanced military technology is obsolete?" "I'm suggesting that when facing an enemy specifically designed to counter advanced technology becomes a liability rather than an asset." Ambassador Kethfer materialized in the briefing room, his bioluminescence dim with what Torres was learning to recognize as Zephyrian embarrassment. "The political ramifications of this are staggering. Our entire military doctrine is based on technological superiority. Your entire military doctrine just got 7 of your most advanced vessels destroyed," Torres pointed out with perhaps more bluntness than diplomacy would suggest. "Then what do you propose?" Vorthak demanded. "That we scrap millennia of technological advancement and return to throwing rocks at our enemies? I propose we match our technology to our enemy. The Harvesters are designed to counter advanced civilizations, so we don't fight them as advanced civilizations." Observer Sindal's crystalline form materialized beside the conference table. There, geometric structure pulsing with rapid calculations. "Admiral Torres speaks tactical truth. The Harvester's scanning protocols identified our modified vessels as insufficient technological threats. They dedicated minimal resources to their destruction and were consequently overwhelmed by weapons they had not adequately prepared to counter." "You're talking about deliberate technological regression," Vorthak said, his voice carrying the horror of a being watching his worldview collapse. "I'm talking about survival," Torres replied firmly. "The Harvesters aren't just another enemy fleet. They're a technological immune system designed to prevent civilizations from advancing beyond a certain point. Every time we try to out-tech them, they adapt and become stronger. The only way to win is not to play their game." The debate that followed lasted 6 hours and might have continued indefinitely if not for the urgent alert that came through from the Outer Rim Defense Network. 18 Harvester entities had been detected moving toward the core worlds, and preliminary projections suggested they would reach the major population centers within 48 hours. "How large is our converted fleet?" Vorthak asked with the resignation of someone accepting an unpalatable reality. 12 vessels operational, with 6 more completing modifications, Torres replied. "Against 18 Harvesters, we'll need every advantage we can get. What do you need from us?" "Permission to implement the simplification protocol galaxy-wide. Every vessel, every weapon, every system reduced to the most basic functional level possible. The silence that followed was pregnant with the weight of civilizations choosing between their pride and their survival. "Granted," Vorthak said finally. "God help us all, but granted." The next 36 hours witnessed the most comprehensive technological retreat in galactic history. Emergency modification protocols were transmitted to every major shipyard and military installation. Quantum phase generators were replaced with steel plating. Bioadaptive systems were surgically removed and substituted with mechanical alternatives. Consciousness-linked controls were ripped out and replaced with manual switches and analog displays. Chief Engineer Santos found herself coordinating modification efforts across 17 star systems, her expertise in primitive human technology. Suddenly the most valuable skill in the galaxy. She worked 18-hour shifts, teaching alien engineers how to build systems their civilizations had abandoned thousands of years ago. The key principle, she explained to a group of Altarian technicians via holographic conference, is redundancy. Through simplicity. Every system should have multiple manual backups. Every control should be operable by a trained crew member without computer assistance. If it requires advanced processing to function, it's too sophisticated for this mission. On the Zephyrian homeworld, entire crystal ship construction facilities were being retrofitted to produce vessels that would have been considered scrap metal just days earlier. Kethfer personally oversaw the modifications, his usual melodious voice strained with the effort of accepting such a comprehensive rejection of his species' technological achievements. "This feels like sacrilege," he confided to Torres during one of their coordination calls. "We're deliberately making ourselves inferior." "You're making yourselves appropriate to the threat," Torres corrected. "A quantum phase vessel is superior to a steel ship in almost every conceivable scenario. But against an enemy specifically designed to counter quantum phase technology, steel becomes the superior choice." The Vorthan bioship conversion process was perhaps the most traumatic, requiring the literal death of the organic components that had given their vessels consciousness and adaptability. War Master Thrix supervised the process with the stoicism of a surgeon amputating a limb to save a patient. "The ship minds understand," he told Torres during one particularly difficult conversion. "They sacrifice themselves willingly so their crews might survive, but it is difficult to watch consciousness fade from beings you have worked alongside for decades." The Ethereum conversions were the most complex, requiring beings of pure consciousness to operate purely physical systems. Meditation techniques developed by human Buddhist monks, of all things, proved surprisingly effective in helping crystalline consciousnesses adapt to manual controls. "It is a return to primitiveness," Sindel observed during one training session, but also a return to mindfulness. Each action requires conscious thought rather than automatic response. Perhaps there is wisdom in such deliberate inefficiency. As the modifications continued around the clock, long-range sensors tracked the approaching harvester fleet. The entities moved in perfect formation, their impossible geometries creating patterns that suggested vast intelligence and purpose. They were heading directly for Centauri Prime, the galaxy's political and military capital. Estimated time to arrival at Centauri Prime, 14 hours. Reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from the sensor station of the Indomitable. "The modified fleet is as ready as it's going to be." Torres stood on the bridge of her flagship, studying the tactical displays. 31 vessels, the largest deliberately primitive fleet assembled in galactic history. Human ships that had required no modification stood alongside Zephyrian crystal hulls stripped of their quantum matrices. Vorthan bioships converted to purely mechanical systems, and Etherean craft rebuilt as single-dimension vessels. It was Either the most brilliant tactical adaptation in military history or the most spectacular act of technological suicide ever attempted. All ships, this is Admiral Torres. Today we face an enemy that has spent 3 millennia perfecting the art of turning our greatest achievements against us. They expect to fight an advanced civilization. Instead, they're going to meet something they haven't encountered before. Beings intelligent enough to choose simplicity over sophistication when the situation demands it. She paused, looking around the bridge at her crew. Human faces mixed with alien features as the Joint Task Force. Prepared for battle. Remember, manual controls only, no automated systems, and keep your targeting solution simple. We're not trying to outthink these entities. We're trying to be so fundamentally different from their expected targets that their countermeasures can't adapt. The fleet moved out in formation, 31 vessels carrying the hopes of an entire galaxy. Behind them, the most advanced civilizations in known space watched and waited, their fate dependent on technology their ancestors would have recognized. The Battle of Centauri Prime began not with the spectacular light shows and exotic energies that had characterized galactic warfare for millennia, but with the simple, brutal efficiency of metal striking metal at tremendous velocity. The Harvester fleet had arranged itself in a complex, three-dimensional formation around Centauri Prime, their impossible geometries creating interference patterns that disrupted most forms of advanced sensor technology. They were clearly preparing for the arrival of quantum phase vessels, bioadaptive ships, and dimensional fold craft, the standard response pattern they had observed and countered countless times over 3,000 years. What they got instead was Admiral Torres's deliberately primitive armada. Harvester formation analysis complete, reported War Master Thrix from his converted bioship Steel Fury. Their positioning suggests preparation for multi-dimensional assault patterns and quantum-coherent attacks. Perfect, Torres replied. From the Indomitable. They're defending against weapons we don't have and tactics we won't use. All ships close to kinetic weapons range. When we open fire, I want a full spread from every vessel simultaneously. Observer Sindal's consciousness interfaced carefully with the manual controls of the reconstructed Simple Truth. Admiral, the Harvesters are attempting to scan our vessels. Their analysis protocols appear to be ... confused. Torres allowed herself a grim smile. Let them stay confused. The longer they spend trying to understand our primitive technology, the closer we get. The approach took 23 minutes, an eternity in space combat, but the Harvesters seemed unable to classify the incoming fleet as a legitimate threat. Their sensors detected fusion reactors, steel hulls, and chemical propulsion systems that barely registered on their threat assessment algorithms. Range to target, 50,000 kilometers, announced Lieutenant Rodriguez. All ships report ready for kinetic bombardment. All vessels, execute attack pattern Alpha, continuous. Fire until ammunition is exhausted. What followed was a display of warfare that would have been familiar to gunboat commanders from humanity's Age of Sail. No exotic energies or reality-warping weapons, just solid projectiles accelerated to tremendous velocities, punching through Harvester hulls with the inexorable force of physics. The Harvester's response was immediate and sophisticated. They deployed energy shields designed to disperse plasma bolts, quantum scramblers meant to disrupt coherent attacks, and adaptive countermeasures that could analyze and counter bioweapon systems in real time, none of which had any effect on tungsten slugs traveling at 12 kilometers per second. Direct hits on multiple targets, reported Captain Chen from her position at the tactical station. Harvester vessels are taking significant damage. Their hull materials appear to be optimized for energy absorption rather than kinetic resistance. They Battle unfolded with brutal efficiency. Harvester after harvester was reduced to drifting debris by weapons that any pre-space flight civilization could have conceived. Their advanced technology, designed to counter every conceivable form of sophisticated attack, proved utterly useless against the deliberate simplicity of kinetic bombardment. Lead Harvester, attempting to adapt, called out Kethfer from the converted Zephyrian vessel Crystal Hammer. It's deploying some kind of protective barrier. Torres watched the tactical display as the damaged Harvester entity began extruding a cloud of what appeared to be metallic particles around itself. Kinetic chaff, she realized. They're trying to create a debris field to stop our projectiles. Is it working? Asked War Master Thrix. Check your targeting computers, Torres replied. Oh wait, we don't have targeting computers. Manual. Gun layers, adjust your aim to compensate for the chaff cloud. High explosive rounds should clear a path through their defensive measures. The solution was so simple it was almost insulting. While the Harvester's adaptive chaff cloud might have stymied computer-guided smart weapons, it was no match for human gunners manually adjusting their aim and firing explosive shells to clear firing lanes. Target neutralized, reported Gunnery. Sergeant Vasquez with professional satisfaction. Sometimes the old ways really are the best ways. The battle continued for 2 more hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. 18 Harvester entities, each one capable of destroying fleets of advanced warships, were systematically reduced to scrap metal by weapons technology that predated galactic civilization. As the last Harvester construct broke apart under kinetic bombardment, Torres allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. They had just proven that intelligence wasn't about having the most advanced technology. It was about choosing the right tool for the job. All ships, begin salvage operations. I want detailed analysis of every piece of Harvester technology we can recover. And someone get me a channel to Galactic Command. I think they're going to want to hear about this. The days following the battle of Centauri Prime were marked by a phenomenon unprecedented in galactic history: the deliberate technological retreat of advanced civilizations. The victory over the Harvesters had proven that sometimes progress meant going backwards, and species that had spent millennia pursuing ever greater sophistication suddenly found themselves learning to build simpler, more robust systems. Admiral Torres found herself in the surreal position of being the galaxy's foremost expert on primitive military technology. Her temporary office aboard Centauri Prime Station was constantly filled with alien engineers, strategists, and scientists eager to learn the principles of appropriate technology that had saved their civilizations. The fundamental concept, she explained to a gathering of Zephyrian military planners, is matching your tools to your mission. A quantum phase vessel is an incredible achievement, but it's only superior if your enemy can't turn quantum mechanics against you. Ambassador Kethfer, his bioluminescence now carrying undertones of genuine respect rather than condescension, leaned forward in his chair. But how do we determine when to use advanced technology and when to use simpler alternatives? Intelligence. Torres replied. Real intelligence isn't about building the most sophisticated system possible. It's about understanding what kind of system you actually need. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of War Master Thrix, whose cybernetic components had been reduced to the bare minimum necessary for his biological functions. The Vorthan commander had volunteered for the modifications himself, arguing that if his ships needed to be simplified, their crews should adapt as well. Admiral Torres, he rumbled, his voice now produced by organic vocal cords rather than electronic. Speakers, the Vorthan High Command has made a decision. We are implementing the simplification protocol across our entire fleet. That's a significant commitment, Torres observed. It's a necessary commitment. Our bioadaptive technology nearly led to our extinction. We won't make that mistake again. Over the following weeks, the galaxy underwent a transformation that historians would later call the Great Simplification. Shipyards that had spent centuries perfecting exotic technologies were retrofitted to produce steel-hulled vessels with manual controls. Military academies revised their curricula to include courses on appropriate technology, selection, and tactical primitivism. The psychological impact was perhaps even more significant than the technological changes. Species that had defined themselves by their technological achievements were forced to confront the possibility that advancement and improvement weren't always the same thing. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had been promoted to Director of Appropriate Technology Research, established a new field of study that examined the relationship between technological sophistication and tactical effectiveness. Her first published paper, When Simple Solutions Are Superior Solutions, became required reading at military colleges across the galaxy. The harvesters taught us something crucial, she wrote. Every technology has vulnerabilities, and the more complex the technology, the more complex its potential points of failure. Sometimes the most advanced solution is the recognition that advancement isn't always the answer. The cultural changes were profound. Zephyrian society, which had spent millennia pursuing ever greater quantum coherence, began exploring what they called coherent simplicity, the art of achieving complex goals through deliberately simple means. Vorthan bioships incorporated manual backup systems that could function even if their organic components failed. Etherian consciousness entities learned to appreciate the meditative quality of operating purely physical controls. But perhaps the most significant change was in humanity's position within galactic civilization. The species that had been dismissed as primitive taxi drivers were suddenly the galaxy's most valued military advisors. It's ironic, Torres observed to Captain Chun as they reviewed fleet modification reports in Torres's new office as Director of Galactic Defense Simplification. We spent decades trying to prove we belonged among advanced civilizations. It turns out what we needed to prove was that advancement isn't always better. Do you think it will last? Chun asked. This new appreciation for simplicity? Torres considered the question while watching construction reports from shipyards across the galaxy. Thousands of vessels were being built or modified according to human primitive principles. For a while, she said finally, until the next crisis comes along and everyone forgets the lessons they learned from this one. But that's okay. We'll be here to remind them. 5 years after the Battle of Centauri Prime, Admiral Torres stood on the observation deck of the UES Simplicity, humanity's newest flagship and a testament to the principles that had saved galactic civilization. The ship was a study in deliberate restraint, steel hull, fusion reactor, kinetic weapons, and manual controls. It would have been completely familiar to naval engineers from Earth's early space age. It was also the most effective warship the galaxy had ever produced. Admiral Captain Chun approached with a datapad containing the morning's intelligence briefings. We've received reports of unusual energy signatures from the Andromeda contact zone. The Xenorchaeology teams think they might have found evidence of another ancient civilization. Torres accepted the pad and scanned the preliminary reports. The energy patterns were sophisticated, perhaps even more advanced than the builders had been. In the old days, such a discovery would have prompted immediate deployment of the galaxy's most advanced exploration vessels. What's the recommended response? Torres asked. The Exploration Council is suggesting a joint mission. Mixed fleet composition. Some advanced vessels for scientific analysis, some simplified ships for contingency planning. Torres smiled, noting how naturally the galaxy had adapted to the concept of technological diversity as a strategic advantage. Approved. But I want the simplified vessels in the lid. If there's something out there that doesn't like advanced civilizations, I'd rather find out sooner rather than later. Yes, ma'am. There's something else. The Zephyrian Naval Academy has requested permission to send a class of cadets to observe human training exercises. They want to study what they're calling tactical primitivism. Granted, it's always good to have students eager to learn. As Chun left to implement the orders, Torres returned her attention to the view outside. The space around Centauri Prime was filled with vessels that represented the new galactic paradigm, ships that prioritized effectiveness over sophistication, reliability over innovation. They weren't the most advanced vessels the galaxy could build. They were the most appropriate vessels for the threats they faced. Her contemplation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the bridge. Admiral Torres to the command center. Priority 1 alert. Torres made her way quickly to the ship's nerve center, where Lieutenant Rodriguez was bent over his sensor displays with an expression of intense concentration. Report, Torres ordered. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the edge of known space. It's single quotes S. unusual. Elaborate. The signal is incredibly advanced, beyond anything we've seen before. But it's not trying to penetrate our systems or analyze our technology. It's just talking. The main screen activated, showing a view of deep space where a single construct hung motionless against the stars. Unlike the Harvester's impossible geometries, this entity appeared almost organic in design, with flowing lines and surfaces that seemed to shift like liquid metal. A voice filled the command center, not transmitted through their communication systems, but somehow speaking directly to their minds in words each person understood perfectly. Greetings, beings of the young galaxy. I am Archive Keeper Eternal Dawn of the Transcendent Collective. We have observed your recent adaptation with great interest. Torres stepped forward, her years of experience with first contact protocols taking over. This is Admiral Rachel Torres of the Galactic Defense Force. We're honored by your contact. Admiral Torres. Your reputation has spread farther than you might imagine. The species that learned to choose appropriate tools over advanced tools. The civilization that discovered wisdom in simplicity. We learned from necessity. The greatest wisdom often does. We come to you with a proposition. The universe is vast and filled with challenges that require different kinds of solutions. Some problems demand the most advanced technology possible. Others require the careful application of simpler approaches. Would you be interested in joining a larger community of civilizations that have learned this balance? Torres exchanged glances with her bridge crew. This was the opportunity they had worked toward for decades. Recognition not as a primitive species trying to catch up, but as equals offering a unique and valuable perspective. We're listening, she said. Excellent. But first, we must test your commitment to your principles. In the Veil Nebula, there exists a problem that has challenged 17 different advanced civilizations over the past millennium. Each has failed, because they approached it with increasingly sophisticated solutions. We believe it requires a different perspective. What kind of problem? The kind that can only be solved by beings wise enough to know that sometimes the most advanced approach is the simplest one. Torres felt a familiar thrill of anticipation. Another challenge, another opportunity to prove that human primitiveness was actually sophisticated understanding of appropriate technology. We'll need details on the threat, logistical support for the mission, and authorization from the Galactic Council. All will be provided, but Admiral Torres, this challenge will test not just your tactical abilities, but your commitment to the principles that have brought you this far. It would be very easy to revert to more sophisticated approaches when simple ones prove difficult. Archive Keeper, If there's one thing humanity has learned, it's that the easy path and the right path are rarely the same thing. The entities form pulsed with what might have been approval. Then we shall see if the galaxy's youngest military power can teach its oldest civilization something new about the value of wisdom over advancement. As the transmission ended and the alien construct vanished into the depths of space, Torres looked around the command center at the faces of her crew. Human and alien officers working together, united by the understanding that true intelligence lay not in building the most complex solutions, but in choosing the most appropriate ones. "Well, people," she said with the confidence of someone who had spent years proving that the old ways were often the best ways, "looks like we have another chance to show the universe that sometimes the most primitive approach is the most sophisticated strategy of all." The stars wheeled overhead, filled with challenges that would test the wisdom they had learned. But Torres was ready. Humanity was ready. And for the first time in galactic history, being primitive was exactly what the universe needed. Incredible. Humans, if this story of technological wisdom and human ingenuity didn't give you goosebumps, check your pulse. This proves something amazing about our species. We don't just adapt to challenges. We completely redefine what strength looks like. Think about it. How many times in your own life has the outdated solution been the best solution? Your grandmother's cooking methods, hand tools that work better than electric ones, or simple approaches that cut through complex problems like a hot knife through butter? The galaxy learned what humans have always known, that intelligence isn't about having the fanciest tools, it's about choosing the right tools for the job. Sometimes that means going backwards to go forward, and there's profound wisdom in that simplicity. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time when you chose the primitive solution and it worked better than the high-tech alternative. And absolutely smash that like button if you believe that, human. Ingenuity isn't about building the most complex solutions. It's about finding the most effective ones. I've got another mind-blowing story coming up about what happens when the galaxy's most advanced AI meets humanity's most illogical trait, our refusal to give up. Trust me, you won't want to miss how we accidentally break the laws of artificial intelligence itself. Until next time, remember, in a universe full of beings trying to be more advanced, sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is choose to be appropriately simple. See you in the next one. Tactical Primitives.